What's going on, Nerd Nation? Welcome back to the Comic Book Nerd Nation podcast, episode number 31. I'm Fox2. Today we're here with Pirate.
What's going on, guys and girls?
Topher.
I'm still eating breakfast. They told me to put down the strudel, so I picked up a muffin instead.
And the whole effing Brian.
I'm just combing my beard.
Topher, how are you still eating breakfast at 1 o'clock in the afternoon?
I just got up like 45 minutes ago.
Okay, fair enough, I suppose. Let's jump right into what you've been reading. This week for me, personally, super light. I didn't get to read anything. I've just been really busy with other stuff. So, unfortunately, nothing would be my section, and then we'll jump over to Brian.
This week I read 2 books. One was Superman number 32, with the start of Jeff Johns and John Romita Jr.'s run. It was pretty good. I liked it enough to pick up the next one. It's just a jumping off start to their run. So the first book didn't really give you the effect of what they're going to do.
Was the art distracting?
It's not. I don't feel like the art's that bad. I mean, if you guys read The Last Batman Eternal from the previous week, that art was horrific. And I've read books with John Romita Jr.'s art in it before. Like, he did the Avengers not so many years ago. He's done the Hulk.
Did you read the new Batman Eternal for this week?
No, I haven't. Not yet.
Did you see the artwork to see if it was the same or?
No, I didn't look through it either. I'm hoping it's not the same.
I haven't picked mine up yet. I didn't even get to go to the comic book store yet this week. So next Wednesday I'll pick up 2 weeks worth of stuff.
I want to talk about isn't something that I liked. It's something that I don't like. It was the first issue of Iron Man versus Hulk for the original Sin.
Oh no, it's bad?
It's not a badly written book. It's just I don't like what they're trying to do to it. Like, they're trying to make Tony Stark have something to do. He had hands in effing up the gamma bomb that turned Bruce Banner into the Hulk.
That's rewriting like decades
tons of history,
of comic book history.
Yeah, it ended up being like he had. It starts off weird because, you know, if you read Original Sin, the Watcher's eye blew up and sent out some psychic shit where everybody remembered one of their original sins. And the way they describe Tony and Bruce remembering this, he's like, that this had happened. Tony was like, something I forgot about that happened years ago. I'm like, really? You forgot?
How would Yeah, I forgot. I created the Hulk.
Yeah. Something I haven't remembered in years? Like, really?
Oh, yeah. Remember that time when the big bomb went off? It was wild, man.
Giant green monster came out.
And, like, the book...
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Apparently.
Yeah, what happens in New Mexico stays in New Mexico, even though I blew up one of my friends and turned him into a giant monster where his life would never be the same again.
Right.
I mean...
The cup's still half full. I mean,
at the end... Banner remembers it, and you see he's like, those weren't my hands. Like, somehow he saw what Tony was remembering also, and like he's like, those aren't my hands. And you see a glass of like alcohol, and then the last panel is Tony's like reflection in the glass of alcohol. I'm like,
come on.
So you're putting this on Tony Stark effing this up because he was a drunk. I mean, it was tons of history. Now they're just throwing this thing in, like
maybe they're doing
years
it
later.
Maybe they're doing it just simply. Maybe they're doing it just simply because they're about to like rewrite all of Marvel. Anyway, like reboot it all.
I hope so. I just can't. It's just like.
I would have to think that they're coming up on a reboot because with something like that, I mean, like you said, that's a pretty big magnitude, like historical, well documented, like it's always been followed, always been stuck with, and now they're just like, oh, by the way,
It's like, oh, Tony, you're actually Captain America's son, because back in the 40s, before Cap got frozen on ice, he fucked your mom.
Yeah.
It's like, I just don't know. That's just, you don't. Why are you doing that? It's like, oh, Batman, your parents weren't killed; they were just sent off into space.
Yeah. They just
Well, you know,
left you.
they've done that successfully in the past. Sometimes you can make that work. You can take a character's origin and add a new aspect to it. You know, that kind of changes the tone of how everything plays out. And
Who have they
sometimes
done it
it's
with,
really,
though?
and sometimes it's really good. Well, I mean, Wolverine, for instance. You know, how many times did they go back? Like, they didn't write his actual origin until 20, 30 years later. Or even Nightwing. Look at Dick Grayson. In the New 52, they they started saying how the whole Haley Circus thing was actually a training grounds for the Talons of the Court of Owls.
Yeah, but you can't really count New 52 because New 52 was a reboot of DC's stuff.
But they said that Batman's characters' histories weren't different. That those remained intact.
Yeah, his and Green Lanterns were left alone.
Well, clearly that was a lie.
But like those
it's confusing. But the thing is, like, those worked. I thought that was really good. I was sitting there reading, Night of the Owls and this background and how Dick Grayson's grandfather was actually a Talon, and how he was being groomed and his name comes from, it was really cool how they went into it. And by the end of it, I was like, oh shit, that was awesome. Like, I just listened to Brian tell that, and part of me is horrified by how much that screws with fundamental concepts of a couple good characters in Marvel. But part of me is slightly amused that they're fucking with Fox's favorite character.
Yeah, I'm not real happy with that. Like, I personally was really looking forward to this series, and I was really bummed out that I didn't get to go to the comic book store this week of all weeks, because it was the start of the Iron Man versus Hulk.
He's been looking forward to that for like a month and a half.
Yeah, I have, and I didn't get to go, and now it's like, fuck, it's gonna be awful. Like, it's gonna be fucking. It's gonna do is piss me off. Like, I don't know. It could be. Yeah, I'll still read it for sure. I mean, I have probably 80+% of all Incredible Hulk books that have been made. So,
but have you read them?
Not every single one of them. No, Jesus.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
you're talking you're talking like 700-800 books.
I know you even got some
of the
shitty ones that were wrote. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've got plenty of shitty ones that were written.
That's what I'm saying. Like but you don't read. You have them.
Oh no, I've read them. I have the. Well, I let you borrow one of them. I have the like the Marvel Essentials books right over here for. So it's like everything Hulk. Starting with the original 6 series, then going through Tales to Astonish, then back into his series, and all the way through. And I'm about through all of the Tales to Astonish section, back into his second, like where it starts with Hulk 102. And then I've read a bunch of the newer stuff. Yeah, late 60s, early 70s. But then after that, I've read a pretty good number of the books as well, including the one that started in 2001, I think, 2002. I can't remember, but I read a whole bunch of those. So, I don't know. We'll see. I'll definitely read it, though, and see, as a fan of the Hulk, with them kind of like manipulating his past, his origin story, how I feel about it, and the way that it... I guess it's going to be hard to really make a judgment call one way or the other until it's like completely done. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
There's always, especially with comic books, there's always that element of unknown, that last little twist that the writer always tries to give at the end and that kind of stuff. So it should be interesting. Is that everything that you read this week, Ryan?
Yeah, that was everything.
What about you, Topher?
Did M. Night Shyamalan write that?
It's possible.
Probably. What's a twist?
Twist.
Well, I read about 10 times as much stuff as Fox did this week. So, what's 10 times 0?
0.
Oh shit. Well, then let me talk a minute about this muffin that I just ate. I actually bought it yesterday, so I guess it wasn't quite as fresh as it could have been. It was an almond poppy seed. I was hoping for a little more lemon flavor,
Failed drug test.
but the sliced almonds on top just not as good the next day after. Like they just lost their flavor. So I don't know if it just because it wasn't fresh, or if it just wasn't a good muffin to start with. I don't know, but I was.
Chris likes to have. Topher wants those fresh nuts.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for the sequel to that series.
I was a little disappointed in the ending. I mean, it wasn't. It was probably less disappointing than. I mean, maybe Tony Stark went and fucked with the recipe, and messed up my muffin. Maybe we'll find that out next week.
Fucking bastard!
These are my hands. These are the Muffin Man's hands.
He's got his hands in a little bit of everything. Son of a bitch. Pirate, what about you? What have you been reading?
What did I read? Let's see. I don't think I read anything this week. I take that back. I read some early New 52 Flash.
How do you like that series?
I mean, it's Flash. I mean, I don't know. I was never huge into Flash, but like, I don't know.
You're jumping on the bandwagon now that the show's getting ready to come out.
Kinda, like
I mean, it's fine. A lot of people
pilot already.
The background, but I don't know. Like, I always liked Flash as a character. I just thought that the villains he fought were kind of corny. I mean, like, like Gorilla Grodd and Weather Wizard and the Trickster, and I just never really. It wasn't so much the character; it was the villains that I didn't like. But the Rogues were cool, especially the way the New 52 does them, where they actually have elemental powers instead of just having the technology. I like that. But like I said, I just never really got into the villains that he fought. But I did like him in like Justice League and World's Finest, or not World's Finest. Yeah, he was in World's Finest too. A couple other things that he was in. But
right on. Is that the only thing you read this week?
I believe so. Yeah.
All right. Well, then, before we get into anything else, the long overdue that Topher has been waiting for forever, that I took all kinds of shit for last week.
Transformers 4 review.
Yeah. No. No, we're going to talk about... Topher just about choked to death over there. We're going to talk about X-Men Days of Future Past, and we're going to even let Topher start the conversation. Go for it.
So I heard some not so great things about this. I heard that the Dinobots actually aren't really in it that much, and that they don't really have speaking parts, and that Optimus Prime, the way he treats him, just isn't great. So I don't know. I'm not looking forward to the Transformers as much as I was before.
I loved it. It was awesome.
All right, yeah. So,
but did you see it already? I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Right. So back to X-Men, like I said.
Oh, right.
Days of the Future Autobots.
Days of Dinobots Past.
Yeah.
So yeah, Days of Future Past. I loved it. I thought it was great. I went into this movie thinking that it was. I think it was going to be very difficult to live up to the quality of the movies that Marvel Studios has been putting out, and I thought they were actually up to it this time. Some of the X-Men movies of years past, while decent at the time, you go back and watch them now and they really show their age, and I was afraid that, that this one was going to do likewise. I like how they took, the things I liked about First Class and kept them, some of the characters, some of the origins, but the fact that it wasn't the actual First Class from the comics, kind of bugged me. Well, they pretty much decided that those characters are mostly gone, and so I kind of like that. But what you had here was a really good movie that was a sequel to two different franchises, and basically kept all the best parts of both, meanwhile obliterating everything shitty from either one. and I thought it was done almost masterfully. I mean, you've got the the original X-Men trilogy that ended with X-Men 3 and the whole Phoenix debacle, and then you had First Class, and this
Let's
basically is
not
a
forget
sequel.
Wolverine.
You mean those two
What do
great
you- what do
movies
you
that
mean?
came out just about the Wolverine? Those were awesome.
um, so you've got a sequel to both those movies. It's taking place in both the in the past, which is First Class's timeline, and then you've got the present day, which is the aftermath of the original trilogy, and I thought they tied the two together so well. And in going back and changing the past, they basically said that, hey, we acknowledge these movies, but guess what? So not only did they do a good movie, but in the process of doing that good movie, they managed to say, yeah, we're throwing out all this shit because we don't like it, and I thought it was really well done.
Now, where would you rank it as an X-Men fan? Clearly, a huge X-Men fan. Where would you rank it in order of against the Marvel movies, or even the Nolan movies? As far as comic book movies in general, where would you rank X-Men: Days of Future Past?
That's tough because I haven't rewatched it yet. Normally a big part of my ranking for movies is how much enjoyment I get out of rewatching it again. Because like a movie can be great, but if you don't want to watch it again, then it's like, why would I want to buy it? Why would I want to? I mean, movies are great movies if you want to watch them over and over again.
Right.
And and for me, Dark Knight takes the cake. Like Joker, that portrayal was just so amazing. Like that's still my top spot. And and I think Avengers was always my second. Captain America: Winter Soldier might have bumped Avengers out of number 2, but I think X-Men: Days of Future Past is right up there with those. I mean, I'll have to see where I don't think it's gonna knock Dark Knight out of the top spot, but I'd say I'd say I liked it almost as much as the Avengers. So
Oh wow,
I'd put it above most everything else.
that's incredible. Brian, what about you? What are your thoughts on the movie?
The best thing that movie has done is erased everything but First Class and Days of Future Past. All the other movies, all that history is all gone. Like everything, it's all erased. That whole history is all erased. I'm pretty sure they've even said everything but First Class has been erased because of the movie's happenings. I thought it was one of the best X-Men movies to date, and First Class being in second.
Oh, I liked First Class.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it.
I had a few gripes, like the whole Beast hulking out thing. Like, he made this serum that he takes, and
Yeah, I don't understand, how does he control the ability to Hulk out?
he gets angry and stressed out, and he turns into the Beast again.
So
I don't.
So he's the Hulk.
Basically, the Hulk Beast.
Yeah. So he's
Blue Hulk.
he's Blue Hulk, except he's not Rick Jones.
I didn't like how they drastically changed him looking from cat-like, feline-like in Days of Future Past to looking like they just stuck blue paint and crazy hair all over the place. If anybody noticed that, in First Class he looks more like a cat.
I didn't really notice the difference.
Yeah, look at two pictures of him, one from each movie, and you could tell drastically. And the other thing I didn't like is the whole Professor X serum makes him walk, but he doesn't have his powers. I didn't really understand.
I actually kind of liked that because I felt like it added a depth of emotion to the younger Professor X character and kind of provided him with a struggle, because
Yeah.
had that
I
not
mean,
been
yeah.
there would have been really no struggle for his like personality.
Yeah.
His, no
You know, I
emotional.
And in
understand
the
that.
'70s, everyone was addicted to needles and stuff. It was
Yeah.
just
It fit the
It was a thing.
period. It fit the period. It fit Beast's character because Beast actually develops a serum. In the comics, when before Giant Size X-Men #1, when like the original X-Men kind of broke up and the comic ended for a while, he goes off and he still had normal skin, and he actually invented a serum that would suppress mutant powers, and in trying to test it on himself, he accidentally went too far the other way in restoring them, and ended up getting the blue fur permanently, and so it kind of fits Beast's backstory that he did used to dabble around in the '70s trying to come up with a serum that would suppress mutant powers. And I thought it did great things for Professor X's character in the movie, and also the way that it wasn't like it wasn't like a magic pill or something.
Right,
they
right.
basically said like we
Take
found
the
a
blue
way
pill?
to but I mean, like, it wasn't like a magic device or some, like, it was realistic. It was a medical serum that would, suppress the nervous impulses that kept his legs from working, but at the cost of, suppressing his nervous system in his brain to the point where his psychic abilities wouldn't work. I mean, to me,
That's
it almost
another thing,
it
though.
made sense medically.
when in X-Men First Class, that's when Beast first came out, and he turned
closet?
blue because when he first came out the closet blue is because he developed a serum that went too far and permanently fixated his beast mode. That's why he was all blue. And then that's another thing that threw me off about this one is that he wasn't blue at the beginning, and then he said he had this one that suppresses it.
That's
So
be-
he had the permanent
that's
one.
because they went back in time. The timeline, the
This is 10
timeline.
years
that-
after
No,
First Class.
this one's after First Class.
Wait, when
This one's 10 years
Wolverine
after
went
the First
back,
Class.
it was after First Class.
Yes.
Well, then
Yes.
then they flat out screwed up the fucking. Unless he came out with another serum that was more powerful, because Pirate's right. Like in First Class, I believe they said, I screwed up the serum and now I'm stuck with the blue fur.
Mm-hmm.
And then they clearly, like, better than 50% of the movie, he was not hulked out, beasted out, or whatever the hell you want to call it. He wasn't blue for most of the movie, so why? I mean, I guess that would be.
I mean, it
That would
could
be
be
one
like Topher
gripe
said,
I have.
insinuating that he, obviously continued dabbling, and then he fixed the permanent one,
Okay,
and then now
fair
he's
enough.
got this like.
Yeah,
but,
that's a good
They
point.
don't say anything.
They didn't explain that, and I'll be honest, I hadn't actually caught that because I hadn't seen First Class in quite some time, so I didn't actually remember how they
I mean,
left that. But
that's really a minor. I feel like,
Right.
in the scheme of things, that's a minor thing that only somebody that really religiously watches comic book movies would even pick up on. But Pirate, what are your thoughts about the movie as a whole?
My favorite part of the whole movie is that Stryker. Well, I don't know how it ends up, but Stryker does not end up with Wolverine. Mystique disguises herself as Stryker, and which that washes the entire piece of shit Deadpool that they had. Weapon X
But I love that movie.
So, and then also on top of that, they announced something saying that there's big news coming for Deadpool Cinema at San Diego this summer.
Really?
They're
said
gonna
that?
announce it. Yeah.
I had not heard that.
That should be interesting.
Yeah.
Now, before we
They
get,
say what, though?
go ahead.
They've had a script floating around for that for years that I've heard is just amazing, but it's a little more adult, and it never could get greenlit because the studios wanted to make other, more universally accessible films.
Right. Well, and it makes sense. I mean, that they would
Yeah.
want to do that, but
Also, they were supposed to make an X-Force movie, and the only two characters they said are definitely in it so far from the start was Cable and Deadpool.
That could be interesting.
Yeah, they've said, well, and that could be it too. Maybe it's the X-Force spinoff that they've been talking about because, Fox has said that they're going to try and build a their own cinematic universe between the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, and they've got a couple of X-Men offshoots, in the works. And X-Force was one of the ones first thrown out that, that they said they were going to do one of these, fairly soon. So it would make sense that he'd be in that.
I personally, I really enjoyed X-Men Days of Future Past. I don't dislike X-Men. I like them, but I'm not a huge X-Men fan. I don't buy the books, really. I don't really read the books. I watch the movies and stuff. But I can't really think of any one thing that I didn't like about this movie. It was very enjoyable. It was, I was questioning whether or not I was really going to enjoy it going into it, because the last thing that I saw, and I'm probably going to take crap from the group on this, but was the Wolverine where he's in Japan, the newer one.
I still haven't seen that movie. I still haven't seen that damn movie.
I just didn't like it. I don't know why I didn't like it. It just wasn't engaging to me. I ended up turning it off before it was over, and that was it. I just, I rented it on Amazon and didn't even watch the whole thing. It just wasn't. It was bad. It just didn't get my attention. So I went into this movie thinking, like, man, I'm probably not gonna like this movie, but I really did. It really got my attention. Just a few minutes in, and it was with the level of intricacy that they kind of put into the storyline, and all the different factors that kind of play into it with the time travel and everything. I really enjoyed it. That being said, I have a question for the group that I'd like to hear from everybody. One of the biggest points of controversy leading into the movie, one of the biggest things that people were hating on pre-release, pre any kind of production photos or anything like that, was the look of the Sentinels. What were your guys' thoughts of the final product, the Sentinels that, the futuristic Sentinels that were in the movie?
I didn't think that you really seen enough of them to really make it that big of an issue. Like in the future scenes, you really seen them from a distance, and kind of it was so fast, and like with the combat scenes, that it really, to me, I couldn't get a very good like overall depiction. And then when you seen the first Sentinels, when the president's about to unveil them, it was like they were just standing there, and they didn't look horrible, but I don't know, to me, I thought those were not an issue as far as the overall movie. I thought the way that the characters were acting, I was more intrigued on those than the Sentinels. The Sentinels were like, the only cool part that they were really in, other than the very end, was in the future, and they were just snippets in between, him going back in time and them trying to control, Wolverine and keep him zoned in there.
What's your thoughts, Brian? Let's save Topher for last, since he's the big X-Men guru. Now, leading into this, I want to preface this with saying that you thought the world was going to end because of how bad these Sentinels looked prior to that movie release. You did.
The Sentinels from the past didn't look threatening. Didn't look like they would be a big deal. They looked like the X-Men could like kick their ass.
I'll give you that.
I mean, they were just like, they looked like Tonka toys, almost. They just looked like cheap plastic, and look how easily Magneto slid that metal through them and took control of them.
I mean, it was they were demo models.
Yeah, they looked non-threatening. I mean,
yeah, that's the floor model, man. That's just the sales pitch. That's not the real
all
deal.
They had really was those machine guns on those.
Okay, so what do you think about the futuristic ones? Because that's the one where I distinctly remember the posts being made about how awful they were, and that the world was everybody was gonna eat shit because it was terrible.
I mean, they gave a good explanation to why they did what they did.
Okay.
Though I still don't understand completely how they like took her genes and been like, hey, this thing could do this. And to me, they were like almost metallic like, so why couldn't Magneto just crush them all? But I don't know. I don't know why certain movies try to make things so flashy that they take away from like the source material, like those kind of did.
Okay, I can give you that.
I mean, how I don't understand how they were able to absorb and their powers if they were just machines. I don't know. It was weird. It's just weird to me.
Okay.
Those future ones. I
Topher,
mean,
Topher, what about you?
From day one in the comics with the Sentinels, the idea was that you would have a machine who could, with a collective, controlling mind, um, whatever the central station was, could learn and adapt to mutant powers. So you could basically never use the same power. You could never kill one the same way twice in a row, because anytime you used a certain ability on a Sentinel, even to kill it, if there was another Sentinel around to observe what happened, they were self-learning and could say, identify a mutant, know what their powers were, and then reconfigure themselves to protect against those powers. So in a way, they stayed very true to that, in that they were constantly having to come up with new ways of killing them, and that the Sentinels were able to adapt, and use powers that they had seen before. And I thought the thing about Mystique's DNA, like, sure, I don't know exactly how that plays into it, like, I thought it worked for the movie, though. I thought it was fine for what they were doing. So story wise, I thought they did a really good job with the Sentinels. Visuals, it's hard, because when the Sentinels were first created, they looked funny. If you go back and look at them now, I mean, they haven't really even changed much since then. But I mean, the Sentinels look very cartoony and old, and so they were trying to give them a modern update for the movie. The futuristic ones, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about. I didn't think either of them detracted from the movie, but I didn't think they necessarily added anything to it either. Like they were scary, they were formidable. The futuristic ones, the way they could adapt and do different stuff, was kind of interesting. But they looked more like Ultron, or like the robot from Thor, for the first Thor movie that comes and attacks Thor in New Mexico.
That thing is bad as fuck.
Like it, and I can't remember the name of it, but like it looked kind of reminiscent of those, and it didn't look much like a Sentinel necessarily.
Yeah.
But they've shown different Sentinel Mark 1 through God knows how many now in the comics, and they're always adapting and they're always changing. So it kind of fit the theme of the comics, even if they never necessarily used that particular visual. Now the ones in the 70s. I thought they looked too futuristic for the time. I mean, they looked like space age design. Like they looked like something that someone would design for a modern Sentinel today in science fiction. They looked like something out of iRobot or something. Like they didn't look like something that a designer from the 70s would have proposed as futuristic. And it's not something that I paid attention to in the movie a lot, and that distracted me, and that I said, oh, those don't look right. They looked fine in the movie, they did. But if you really sit and think about it, would someone designing robotics in the 70s have come up with a design that looked anything like that?
Probably not.
No, probably not. So I do think that they could have given they even set this in the past. They set this in the 70s. So I don't know why, they did such a good job with the other costumes and making things look, older, and you could use some of the visual style from the older X-Men comics because it was taking place in the 70s.
Right.
So I don't understand why they couldn't have also gone with the 70s concept of futuristic and done something that stayed a little bit more true to the original drawings of the Sentinels. Even if they look hokey now, that's probably what they would have come up with in the 70s, and I think they could have given a little better nod to their original design, even though I didn't think they necessarily detracted from the film as they were.
Right. I agree. I don't mind the way the new ones look. I thought they were pretty neat. I don't really care either way if they change it or they don't, because I'm not a huge X-Men fan. But I do agree with you, especially hearing you say that they could have probably done a little better at paying homage to the original design of what you think of when you think of like even like the 90s 80s and 90s cartoon X-Men Sentinels. Even a real life looking version of that would have been a little bit more, of a nod to the source material, as Brian said earlier.
It looked a little too much like Transformers.
Right. Now, here's another question that I have for the group. With the importance that was placed on the character of Mystique in this movie, and the casting of Jennifer Lawrence to play that, as she's now a rising star from the Hunger Games series, and her rise in popularity, do you think this is a strategic move by Fox to position themselves to really put her in a center stage role going forward, and potentially that's why, that could be potentially why at the end of the movie, the closing scenes, you see her as Stryker capturing or taking over Wolverine, getting Wolverine. Do you think that this is going to lead to her in a very prominent role in future films?
Well, I think that Fox has timed it right, because I heard that they've already stated that that X-Men Apocalypse is supposedly taking place in the 80s. I don't know if you guys have heard that or confirmed that, but I mean, it makes it to the point where if they're doing so much time traveling, not time traveling, but time portraying in the movies, that if they're willing to work a deal out and get her to do the part, great. They can just age her 10 years. If not, it would make sense to put in someone who would look like her 10 years from now. So I think they got it to where they don't have to lock in and screw themselves into dumping a bunch of money if she does get super big, and
I'd say she's already super big.
Yeah, I'd say she's
already there.
But I mean, just granted, if part 2 or the final Hunger Games come out and her films are going from,
they're dividing them into multiple films now. So
right.
They will.
20 million a film to, I'm just throwing numbers around. Like, I mean, you never know. She could end up with like some crazy amount of Oscars and ends up wanting 90 million a film or something ridiculous. And then Fox is just like, you know what, you're a great actor, but that's too much for what we're budgeting for this movie.
Fox, you can say that to her?
I might do that to her.
I think contract negotiation talks are a long way off at this point. Like I mean, she's already a big actress. I think they're treating her fairly well. She doesn't seem like the type of person. I mean, if you ever watch an interview with her, she's totally down to earth. She's amazingly cool. She's not the type who's just going to be like, no, I'm sitting out. I demand more money. Like I just, I mean, I'm sure she'll fight for what she deserves.
You can pick that up off cool people,
but she's not gonna. She doesn't strike me as the type who's gonna be an egotistical jackass over contract negotiations. So I mean, I think we're a long way off from, figuring out whether or not a studio is going to be able to keep her in a particular role.
It's never so much. It's not so much about a negotiation money wise. It's also a negotiation around time wise. I mean, if another movie comes up and she wants to do more and they're willing to pay her more, and she figures that's more where her artistic, she wants to place her artistic future in that, than to just keep playing dress up in blue paint. And
she's
other characters.
She's very much in demand. She is very much in demand, and one thing about the Mystique role that makes it interesting or even difficult from an actor's perspective is a lot of scenes where she's, changing into someone else, she's not on screen as an actress.
Right.
It's the other person that she's turned into. So, I mean, I can see where there could be some interesting, conversations and debates to be had later about, her as an actress and how much screen time she gets and whether the role's worth it. But, at the same time, maybe that frees her up. She films all her scenes, and then the ones where she turns into somebody else, then she can go off and do her movie, and, she's free. So I don't know. I think it's really early to talk about all that.
Topher, do you think that they're going to head in a direction where the Mystique character is going to be a focal point?
I would say that's practically a given at this point. I mean,
I think so too.
you know, in First Class and in Days of Future Past, they've almost set her up as the main character in a lot of ways. In both movies, she is the focal point of a lot of it. You know, you've got, it's very much an ensemble cast. You know, everything X-Men always has been. You know, but there's always a few characters that the other characters seem to spend the most time talking about. You know, and you've got Professor X and Magneto on both sides, you know, like basically almost warring over Mystique's soul, basically. And you know, and that was very much the climax of this movie, was which way is Mystique going to go? What is she going to, you know, when she finally has the power in her hands, which way does she take it? And so I think they've built her up to be right, you know, but you know, they've built her up to be a very main character in this franchise, and I think that's great, because you know, if you actually go back and read the Days of Future Past comics, it was just a 2-issue arc, but the attack on Senator Kelly was led by Mystique in the comics. Like, Magneto was not. He was not part of the Brotherhood at that time. Like, he was actually, you know, getting over. He was his more good guy side, and was actually almost about to take over leading the X-Men for a while, when Professor X gets gravely injured and goes into space to go get healed by the Shi'ar. So like, Magneto was actually kind of out of the picture as a bad guy at the time, and it was Mystique's new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, you know, when she gets together Blob, and this is the first appearance of Pyro, actually, was in that issue, and Avalanche, and you know, and Destiny. And so it was actually Mystique's Brotherhood that leads the attack against Senator Kelly and tries to assassinate him, you know, that they go back in time to try and prevent. So, I mean, Mystique was a major villain in the comics at this point as well. So, I think it makes sense for them to build her up as a main character and to leverage her, and you know, Jennifer Lawrence's amazing, you know, acting skills.
Yeah. Well, now you have Jennifer Lawrence playing her, she is an awesome actress. Before, you had Rebecca Romaine Stamos playing her.
It was a terrible actress.
Terrible. An ex-model. And what has she done good? She was like thrown away in Thomas Jane's Punisher movie. I mean,
I can tell you one awesome thing she's done. John Stamos.
Brian, do you have any other thoughts on this with Mystique? And
I hope the next movie, you know, we didn't speak about the end credit scene where you had the young Apocalypse making the pyramid, and you see the 4 horsemen in the background. Hopefully they take that movie and do just as good with it as they did with Days of a Future Past. And Apocalypse being one of my favorite villains, I hope they do him well.
Yeah, that should be really interesting, honestly, to see how they portray, you know, the entire Apocalypse.
And who they'll make.
All of it, right. We have Pirate the
that,
Decepticon back with us again.
Pirate's evil Sentinel voice at this point. But, you know, like, yeah, I think one of the things that I was most excited about Days of Future Past was not only how good it was, but how excited it made me for the prospect of the Apocalypse movie.
Yeah.
You know, I only had a few nitpicking gripes about Days of Future Past, and I can't even remember them all at this point, but one of them was, you know, they never really explained how Kitty Pryde can send someone back in time, you know, the whole, like, you know, phasing time thing, you know, like, I guess it makes sense.
To me, as not like an avid follower of X-Men, that was a little bit confusing, because I'm not familiar with the Kitty Pryde character at all, and so that was kind of... I didn't really... I mean, I got it that her power is she could send people back, but I just didn't really... I felt like a little bit more explanation and a little more background there would have probably gone a long way.
Well, see, I think they glossed over it on purpose, because I actually missed the explanation and had to ask ask somebody else when I walked out of the theater. I'm like, did they ever explain why? And supposedly there was like one line where they said something about her being able to phase the person's brain to cause their consciousness to go back in time.
That.
And I'm like, okay, because in the comics, no, like she can phase, she can pass through solid objects. That's about it. She can disrupt electronics by phasing through electronics. She's done that a number of times over the last several decades. But the time travel shit, no. In the comics, you actually had there was a character called Rachel Summers, who this was her first appearance. In the comics was in the future of Days of Future Past, and she's actually the daughter of Cyclops and Jean Grey. They don't have a kid yet, in the comics at this point, but in the future she's the grown-up daughter of Cyclops and Jean Grey, and she's actually a really powerful telepath like her mother, and she's the one who sends Kitty Pryde back in time. So it was done differently in the comics, and it made a little more sense because it was a psychic with powerful, telepathic abilities and whatnot. So it made a little bit more sense. But I guess they didn't feel like they could introduce a character, a new character like that in the movie and do it quite as well. Yeah. So it made sense, but it was just
it wasn't bad. I didn't think it was bad at all. It was, I guess I just. And only for a brief moment, as that whole scene, that whole sequence where she's sending Wolverine back in time, I found myself wondering a little bit more, like, how is she doing this? Like, what's her power? Mm-hmm. Just wishing I knew a little bit more. And like I said, the movie itself was good enough that I really only had that feeling for just a moment or two, and I was on
it moved past it. And
I was totally okay with I don't care about that anymore. I'm on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So that being said, let's move on over. I've got a couple of things that we can cover for news this week that I wanted to get your guys' thoughts about before the end of the show here. One thing that I thought was kind of interesting that I'm sure there's going to be some opinions in the group about the Gotham TV show. I think we've all agreed that it looks like it's going to be pretty good and fairly interesting. They came out with character poster images this week, and there was one that was really in question, and it was of the Poison Ivy character. And at the top of these posters, it tells you the character's real name. So like the Riddler, it doesn't say Riddler, it says Edward Nygma. Well, this one, rather than saying Pamela Isley, who we know as comic book fans as the person that becomes Poison Ivy, they are calling her Ivy Pepper for purposes of the television show, which is clearly they just want to get something that sounds closer to Poison Ivy than Pamela Isley or Isley. I'm not a fan of it. I don't like it, but I don't think it's going to have any negative bearing on the quality of the show.
Maybe that's not actually Poison Ivy, since Poison Ivy is like a younger, sexier character. Maybe that's Poison Ivy's stripper mom.
Oh, okay. No.
Maybe it's just Poison and Sue.
I mean, Ivy Pepper sounds kind of like a stripper name to me, so...
Can she rub her hands together and fucking... Salt or pepper? Pepper? Okay.
Oh my god.
Why the Olive Garden?
I mean, do you think that this is going to take away... Pirate, you're a pretty big Batman fan. Do you think that this is going to take away from the credibility of the show with comic book fans?
No, I don't think it is, because, I mean, that is a minute detail, in my opinion. I don't know. I mean, some people are going to, argue that and say, oh, that's huge. You know what I mean? Like, you can't, I mean, it makes it...
I mean, it would be like them changing Bruce Wayne's name to Brett Wayne.
Yeah, but, I mean, it's like, they're putting the...
It's got a nice ring to it, actually.
Brewster Wainson?
Right.
Bruce Wayne is the character in the comic. I mean... In Pamela Isley is, but I think you're right. I think they're wanting it to be more for people who aren't that in depth.
Yeah, they clearly want.
She was in Poison Ivy. It was Pamela Isley in Batman
Forever. Yeah.
Yeah. So she has been in movies before.
They clearly are doing it so that the average watcher that's not a comic book fan can more easily identify that character as, the younger person that ends up turning into Poison Ivy without having to dress her up like Poison Ivy. Because how are you gonna legitimately dress up a young schoolgirl the way that Poison Ivy it's not legally gonna happen. So Topher, what are your thoughts?
They can have like all like plants and shit.
Out there that will love this show.
Yeah, we got a whole new contingent of people watching Gotham now. For some reason, this show is really big with the 60 and over pedophile crowd. I don't know.
The same people who watch fucking
Ivy Pepper
or whatever.
Ivy Pepper all of a sudden has 77% screen time of the television show, even when she has nothing to do with the storyline.
This is the old Hannah Montana fans jumping on the show.
Oh God! Is that what happened to Miley Cyrus? Is that why she's such a whore now?
These same viewers, when they were in their 20s, was watching Full House.
Now she's traveling around the world, smacking people in the crowd in the face with her loose vagina.
Oh God! I just got that picture in my head.
Oh God! Taco slapping the shit out of him.
I just I googled Ivy Pepper to see this image you were talking about, and one of the first results that came up was an article on the Mary Sue called "Ivy Pepper. What were Daisy McFertilizer and Rose O'Flower Villain already taken?"
Rose McFlower Villain. That is the best. Oh, that is fantastic. Rose McFlower Villain. Oh, God. Nice. Clearly, some people are far more negative about this than us.
It looks like Pippi Longstockings hiding in a bush.
I was getting ready to say, the pepper part reminds me of Pippi Longstocking.
Right.
The whole redhead, like, oh, she's a redhead. What other redhead?
Pippi it's like
Pepper. Pepper. Yeah, Pepper works.
Wait, comic book redheads named Pepper? Yeah, exactly. That's where I was going.
Pepper Potts is the biggest one, I would say. Okay, so another bit of news that I found this week was surrounding the Daredevil Netflix TV show, which I'm personally looking forward to this one. I think it's going to be neat. I want to see how they do it with it being a Netflix show instead of a network show. So actor Eldon Henson was added to the cast of Daredevil as character Foggy Nelson. It was commented that he is seen as a friend of the Hell's Kitchen community and friendly with many of the walks of life there. Now, if you're not familiar with Eldon Henson, which I thought I recognized him from the picture that I saw, I instantly looked him up, and I was like, yes, I know where that was from in my childhood. He was Fulton Reed in Mighty Ducks.
Mighty Ducks.
He was the kid with the super powerful slapshot in all of the Mighty Ducks movies. He also was in, more recently, lots of TV shows, but The Butterfly Effect, he was in that as well, with Ashton Kutcher, I think. So, yeah, Fulton Reed is going to be in Daredevil. What are your thoughts on that?
I like it. I mean, the dude's been in a bunch of stuff. He's a decent actor. I mean, he looks kind of like the friendly sidekick type. I mean, I don't see a problem with it.
I like it. I like it because he's, like you said, he's a seasoned actor, so he's obviously knowledgeable about, how to act and experienced. But he's not so recognizable that he's going to take away from the character of the story.
He's not going to take over, but he's going to provide like a legitimate, solid sounding board for the other characters.
I really hope that they have him play some hockey or something at some point.
Have they cast the Daredevil yet?
Yes, they have.
Yeah,
the first
one. Remember, it's the guy from the guy who played Tristan in Star... Fuck, I don't remember the hell.
In Starfuck?
So not Starfuck. No, shit, the Neil Gaiman book. Stardust. The guy who played the main character in Stardust.
Oh yeah. Okay. Because I was having a complete brain fart. I was like, who the hell is it? Who's playing Matt Murdock? Like,
When is
totally
this? When is this series? Remind me. When's this series scheduled to come out?
Next year, I think.
Next year, sometime
Early-
2015, I think.
Is it
Early
early or late in the
next
year?
year?
Do you know? Does anybody know about that?
I thought it was first quarter, but it may be later.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll have to stay tuned for more details for that. That's about it. Actually, we're right at about the hour mark. So we'll go ahead and sign off for the week. Remember, guys, check out www.comicbooknerdnation.com. We got forums on there. All the podcasts are on there in audio format. We're up on Stitcher. We're on Facebook. I think we're still on Twitter. It's not super active right now, but whatever. So I'm Fox2. We got the Pirate,
See you guys.
Topher.
Charlie Cox is his name. He's also in Boardwalk Empire.
Ah,
Oh.
yes.
We got Peppers and Cox.
Peppers and Cox.
Cock
And that is the whole F and Brian. All right, guys. We'll see you next week.